Princess Leora Vale stood at the center of the great marble hall of Solaria Palace. The morning light came through the glass walls and made the floor shine like calm water. Around her, the nobles waited in silence. Every face carried curiosity, fear, or hope. The wedding that everyone had talked about for months was supposed to be announced that day, but she stood there in a pale silver gown and said the words that no one expected. She said no. Her voice was calm and clear. Each syllable spread through the hall like a sudden drop of rain. The courtiers gasped. The musicians, who had been ready to begin the celebration, lowered their instruments. The queen sat back on her throne, her face still and cold. She was a proud woman named Althera, both ruler and mother, strong in her own way. She had dreamed of this day when her daughter would unite two great houses through marriage and strengthen peace among the colonies. Yet now, the crowd saw the queen's hands tighten on the throne's arms. She had taught her daughter about duty, not rebellion. This was a great insult to the council and to the family name. Leora did not look away. Her heart beat fast, but she refused to bow to fear. For years, she had been told that loyalty to the crown was more important than happiness. But something inside her had changed. She had read stories about ordinary settlers on far planets who built homes from dust and stone. People who followed their hearts instead of tradition. She envied them. The man she was expected to marry was Lord Coranday, a wealthy leader from Orion Prime. He was intelligent and charming, but cold in a way that frightened her. Every meeting with him felt like a business meeting, never a conversation between two souls. Leora wanted to choose her own life. She had dreams of traveling among the stars and meeting people who lived by effort and courage instead of inheritance. Her refusal that morning was not an act of rebellion against her mother alone, but an act of truth to herself. The silence in the grand hall stretched longer than the stained glass shadows on the floor. Finally, the queen rose. Her golden robe shimmered. Her voice carried strong and sharp. She asked her daughter if she understood the weight of her choice. Leora bowed her head slightly and said she did. The queen turned to the council and declared the ceremony cancelled. Hushed whispers filled the air. Courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. The queen then ended the session and dismissed them all. Leora remained standing for a while, feeling the heavy eyes of everyone around her, but sensing a strange freedom beginning to bloom within. When the hall emptied, Leora walked alone through the palace corridor. The high ceilings were painted with the victories of kings and queens who had ruled for centuries. Yet she felt no pride in those images. She only saw how far away she had drifted from such triumphs. Her footsteps echoed softly. Servants pretended not to watch her, but could not hide their curiosity. She passed by the grand mirror at the end of the hall and saw her reflection. Her face was pale, but behind her eyes there was a quiet fire. In her chamber, she stood by the window and looked at the sky. The stars had begun to appear. The night made her feel small, but alive. She thought of the people who built cities on worlds her family had never visited. She wanted to understand their strength and their hope. She wondered what life was like beyond the palace walls, where every decision mattered and every success was earned by hand and heart. The dream of meeting those people became a strong call inside her. When the queen entered later that evening, the air grew still again. She looked at her daughter not as a ruler, but as a mother. She asked why Leora had done what she did. Leora explained that she could not promise love where there was none, and could not give her life to someone she did not trust. The queen listened and said love was often a small thing compared to loyalty. But Leora replied that loyalty without truth was only fear in disguise. So the queen said there must be another way to strengthen ties with Orion Prime, and asked what Leora planned to do instead. Leora answered that she wished to join the diplomatic voyage to the Terran colonies, where she might learn from those who built their lives with courage instead of privilege. The queen frowned, thinking her daughter naive, yet she saw no weakness in her eyes. After a long pause, the queen agreed to let her go, but only under watch and duty. Leora thanked her mother and promised to return wiser than she had left. That night, Leora did not sleep. She packed a plain travel cloak and looked one last time at her royal room. The world she was leaving behind was made of gold and silence. The world waiting beyond the gates promised noise, dust, and truth. As the palace lights dimmed, she whispered to herself that the stars would hear her story before any throne did. And so began the journey that would change her fate and the fate of two worlds. The royal ship arrived at the Terran colonies after a long flight through deep space. Princess Leora stood by the wide window of the transport deck as the planet came into view.
Ow.
It was covered in blue oceans and green lands. Around it moved many shining stations and cities that floated like silver rings in the sky. She had seen beauty before, but this was different. This place looked alive. When the ship docked at New Denver Station, she stepped onto the landing bridge with a small team of guards and aides. The air smelled clean but sharp with the scent of metal and fuel. There was no red carpet or royal band to greet her. Only a group of officers in plain uniforms stood waiting, their faces open and warm. They saluted quickly, then returned to their tasks. Leora's aide whispered that this was the style of the Terrans. They cared more about work than ceremony. She nodded and felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time, no one treated her as a fragile jewel to be protected. She was simply a visitor. The station's governor, a tall woman named Dana Mills, met her at the entryway. Dana spoke clearly and politely, but without fear. She gave a short tour of the main building. Everything was simple, but full of purpose. The walls were clean, the floors plain metal, and every person they passed was busy with some task. Leora was impressed. There was no waste here, only motion and focus. During the tour, a loud clanging sound came from one of the lower floors. Dana smiled and led the group to see what it was. Inside a long hall filled with machines, engineers were repairing a damaged power coil. Sparks flew across the air like tiny stars. It was noisy and chaotic, yet everyone worked in perfect rhythm. Leora looked with interest at a man wearing a dark jacket who seemed to lead the group. His hands moved quickly as he tightened a bolt on the main panel. When he noticed the visitors, he removed his gloves and came forward. His name tag read Aaron Blake. He bowed slightly, more like a friend than a servant. Leora saw that his eyes had the calm light of someone who faced storms and learned to smile through them. The governor introduced him as the chief engineer who had kept the station running during last winter's system failure. Leora thanked him for his service. He only shrugged and said that fixing things was just his job. The simplicity of his answer amused her. The next day, Leora asked to learn more about how Terrans built their cities. Aaron was assigned to give her a tour. He met her early in the morning, wearing his work jacket and carrying a small tablet. He showed her the energy fields that powered the habitation domes and the way recycled air kept people healthy on the station. He spoke plainly, without titles or complicated words. She liked that. As they walked through the maintenance decks, Aaron stopped to help a young worker who had dropped a box of tools. Leora noticed that he never hesitated to assist anyone, even when no one else was watching. She thought of the nobleman back home, who would never bend down to help someone of lower rank. They took a small transport to the surface of the planet later that week. The world below was full of green fields and silver towers. Terran farmers grew food next to advanced laboratories. Children played outside even near the research centers. Leora saw no division between rich and poor. Everyone seemed to work together with ease. Aaron explained that on Earth's colonies, families had built communities by helping one another. There were rules, but no single family ruled over all. People succeeded by effort, not by name. Leora listened quietly and watched the workers in the fields. She remembered her palace, where silence ruled more than fairness. During the trip back to orbit, Aaron asked her why a princess would want to spend time among engineers and workers. She smiled and told him that she wanted to understand how freedom felt. He studied her face for a moment and then said that freedom was not given. It was made every day. His words stayed in her mind for a long time. That evening, there was a dinner for the visiting delegation. It was held in a wide glass hall overlooking the planet. The tables were plain metal, the food simple but delicious. People laughed openly. No one waited for the queen's toast because there was no queen here. When Aaron joined them late, wearing his oil-stained jacket, no one seemed to mind. Leora found herself smiling more than she had in years. After dinner, she walked alone to the observation deck. The stars looked closer through the clear glass. Behind her, she heard Aaron's footsteps. He asked if she liked what she saw. She said yes, because here the stars seemed to belong to everyone, not just to a chosen few. He nodded and said that was the reason Terrans kept pushing forward. They wanted every person to hold a piece of the sky. As she stood beside him, Leora felt a quiet warmth in her chest. The journey that had begun with rejection at her palace was now becoming something far greater. She had come to learn about other worlds, but she was beginning to learn the meaning of her own heart. It was a bright morning above the planet when the calm rhythm of New Denver Station suddenly changed. Sirens echoed through every deck. Lights flashed red along the metal corridors. Leora had been in the observation hall, taking notes about Terran engineering when she felt the soft floor plates tremble. Guards and technicians ran past her, calling warnings. Something had gone wrong. Aaron appeared from the nearby control room, his face marked with urgency. He told her that one of the defense drones had broken free from its signal link. It carried an old fusion core that was unstable. If it exploded near the station, the damage could destroy half the orbital ring. His voice was steady, but Leora saw in his eyes that this was no simple malfunction. He ordered everyone in the hall to head toward the lower shelters. Leora hesitated, watching the flashing screens that showed the drones spinning across the sky. She asked what he intended to do. He said he needed to stop it before it came too close. She offered to help, but he shook his head. He told her to stay safe and ran toward the hangar. The Queen's ambassador, who had joined the mission, tried to prevent Leora from following, but she refused to stay behind. She hurried to the command center where she could at least watch what was happening. The large display showed several pilots preparing to launch, yet many of them hesitated. The drone's unstable core made it suicidal to approach. Their fancy fighter crafts, worth millions, would melt before they could neutralize it. Aaron arrived in an old space glider that looked too weak for the task. Leora stared at the screen in disbelief as the small craft left the hangar. It was made for training, not combat, but he had no other choice. He patched through a channel to the command room and said he would intercept the drone manually. Dana Mills, the governor, tried to stop him, warning that the glider's shields would not hold. Aaron replied that someone had to try. The drone appeared on the outer screen, moving wildly, its lights brightening as the core overheated. Aaron maneuvered his smaller craft beside it, using quick bursts of thrust to match its path. He spoke through the comm, describing what he saw. The drone had lost navigation control, and its system was feeding on its own power. Leora clenched her hands as she listened to his calm voice. He managed to attach magnetic clamps from the glider's arm to the drone's side. The small ship shook as he struggled to steady it. Alarms rang in his cabin, warning him of heat buildup. Engineers in the control room shouted numbers, trying to guide him through reprogramming. He typed commands into the console, his fingers flying across the keys. For long minutes, no one breathed. Then he said he could push the drone away from the station using the glider's limited thrusters. Leora watched the radar. Both traces moved farther from the ring. The drone's light grew brighter, hotter. Aaron's glider accelerated beyond its limits, dragging the dangerous device with it. The heat soon blinded their sensors. The next moment, the outer sensors showed a bright flash in open space. The screen went white, then slowly dimmed to black. For a long time, there was silence in the control room. Finally, a faint signal returned. Aaron's voice crackled through the speakers. He was laughing softly, saying his flight system had failed, but he was alive. His cabin had been hit by debris, and he was drifting. Relief and cheers filled the room. Leora sighed deeply, her eyes full of tears. A rescue unit left the station and soon brought the damaged glider back. When the hangar doors opened, workers and crew surrounded it. Smoke curled from its engines. The hull was broken and blackened, but Aaron stood at the rim of the cockpit, covered with soot and smiling. His jacket was burned, yet his eyes were bright. When he met Leora's gaze, she saw pride without arrogance. Later in the medical bay, doctors checked him for injuries. Leora came to see him. She wanted to thank him but found no words strong enough. He said there was no need for thanks because anyone on the station would have done the same. She replied that maybe, but none had done it yet. He did. The news of his act spread quickly through the colonies and then across the royal networks. The Queen herself sent a message of honor to the Terran team. For the first time, the royal court praised an ordinary engineer as a hero equal to any knight. That evening, a small ceremony was held in the hangar. Aaron refused medals and asked only that the repair teams receive upgraded tools. Leora stood beside him during the applause. She realized how different power could be when guided by care rather than birthright. After the crowd left, they remained near the damaged glider. The stars shone beyond the hangar's shield screen. She told him that his courage had changed something far greater than the course of a drone. It had changed the course of hearts. He smiled in return and said that courage was a habit anyone could learn. As he turned to check the broken craft again, she quietly decided that she would never return home the same as she had come. News of the incident traveled faster than Leora expected. Within 2 days, messages from the royal palace began to arrive. The Queen's Council demanded a report, and whispers of scandal began to grow inside the halls of Solaria. They said the princess had been seen standing beside a common engineer with dirt on his hands. Some claimed she was losing her royal dignity. Others said she had found something greater than pride. For Leora, the noise of politics no longer carried meaning. What she remembered most was the sight of Aaron risking his life while everyone else had frozen. That image stayed inside her mind like a flame that refused to go out. Aaron returned to work soon after the crash, though his shoulder was still sore. He said keeping busy helped him forget the sound of the explosion and the quiet that followed. When Leora visited the hangar, he smiled politely, but kept working. He treated her with the same calm respect as before. He did not act like a hero, and she admired him for that. In the following weeks, her duties changed. The governor invited her to join meetings about trade and science projects between Solaria and the colonies. At first, the Terran officials spoke to her with caution, expecting her to defend her mother's strict policies. To their surprise, she listened more than she spoke. She asked clear questions and sought fair answers. Slowly, they began to trust her. Every evening after the meetings, Leora liked to walk near the maintenance decks, where the large windows opened toward the blue curve of the planet. Sometimes Aaron joined her. They talked about small things at first, about the music the workers played during long shifts or about the meals served in the station kitchen. Piece by piece, their conversations grew deeper. One night, she asked him why he had not left for a higher post on another colony after his heroic act. He said that honor was nice, but it did not fix broken engines. He preferred to stay where he was needed. She laughed quietly and told him that back home, every noble would chase rewards after such bravery. He shrugged and said that work itself was reward enough. Leora felt peace with him, something her palace walls had never given her, yet she knew the peace would not last. Messages from her mother became sharper by the day. The Queen wanted her back in Solaria to resume royal duties and to renew the alliance with Orion Prime. Leora avoided answering, hoping for more time. She feared that if she returned now, the council would chain her future with a new set of promises. When another royal envoy arrived, the air aboard the station grew tense. The emissary brought formal letters with royal seals. In private, he warned Leora that her closeness with a common man brought shame to her crown. She listened in silence, said the Queen would soon order her return. She thanked him politely and left the room before he could continue. That night she could not sleep. She went to the observation deck and looked at the stars that drifted beyond the glass. Aaron found her there. He asked if something was wrong. She told him that her time might be ending. She explained that her mother believed loyalty came before love, and that royalty must act, not feel. Aaron said he understood the weight of duty, but reminded her that duty without belief was just obedience. He told her that in the colonies people were not measured by birth, but by the truth in their actions. She listened silently to his words. They talked for a long while until the lights dimmed and the station entered sleep mode. The next morning, she sent a message to the Queen. She wrote that she could no longer pretend to be what others wanted her to be. She wanted to serve the Empire, not as a symbol, but as a bridge between kingdoms and people. She asked permission to remain among the Terrans until her mission was complete. The reply came the next day with cold words. The Queen denied her request and ordered her to return within a week. For hours, Leora sat in her chamber, staring at the message. Her stomach twisted with dread, yet beneath it was a stronger force. She could not go back and live behind golden walls again. Later, she went to the hangar to find Aaron repairing a damaged shuttle. She told him about the command. He looked at her quietly, then said that only she could decide whether to obey it. Leora walked the length of the hangar thinking hard. The sound of tools against metal echoed like distant bells. At last she stopped beside the open bay and watched the planet turning slowly below. When she looked back at Aaron, she saw a man who had no title but held the strength of 10 kings. She realized that power built on fear could never equal power born from honesty. That evening, she drafted a second message to her mother. This time, she did not ask for permission. She declared that she would not return to a life arranged by others. She would serve the crown by proving that peace could be built through trust rather than control. Outside the window, the stars burned like hope. She turned away and saw Aaron watching her from across the room. For the first time since she had left Solaria, she felt completely free. The Council of Solaria could not ignore the message sent by Princess Leora across the royal city. The news spread through streets and towers that the heir of the crown had defied her mother. Some saw rebellion, others saw bravery. The queen remained silent for several days. Her advisors urged her to send ships to bring her daughter home by force, but the queen did not act. She spent long hours alone in her chamber, looking out through the high crystal windows. Deep inside her heart, she remembered her own youth before the weight of the crown had turned dreams into rules. On New Denver Station, Leora continued her work with the Terran Council. The people there treated her not as royalty, but as a partner. Together they discussed how to improve trade and learning between planets. She learned how trust could build faster bridges than treaties. The Terrans listened because they saw in her not a title but a woman who respected their ways. Aaron stayed busy as always, repairing broken lines and training young workers. Yet since the message had been sent, he noticed the hidden worry in Leora's eyes. She tried to appear calm, but he could sense her fear that her mother might send soldiers. One evening, he found her on the quiet deck near the cargo bays. She stood by the glass watching cargo ships move between stars. He told her that if her mother sent guards, he would not let them take her alone. She smiled faintly and said she hoped it would not come to that. Days passed before a royal fleet appeared in orbit. The sight of the shining ships caused whispers and unease in the colony. Governor Dana Mills ordered that no weapons be raised unless the fleet made an open threat. Leora insisted on welcoming the visitors herself. When the lead ship sent a signal requesting an audience, she prepared a simple reception in the hall. When the royal shuttle landed, the doors opened, and a line of guards in silver armor stepped out. Behind them walked the queen. Her face was proud but tired. The years of rule showed in the calm sadness of her eyes. Leora bowed deeply and greeted her mother with respect. The queen stepped forward and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. The soldiers and colonists watched in silence. The queen said they must speak alone. They walked to a nearby chamber filled with maps and glowing screens. For a time they said nothing. The queen looked around the plain metal room and said it was very different from the palace. Leora nodded and told her that here work and worth were shared by all. The queen asked if the girl she once raised was now ashamed of her birth. Leora said softly that she was not ashamed, but had learned that crowns mean nothing if hearts are empty. The queen listened without anger. She said she had feared losing her daughter to foolish dreams, yet now saw understanding in her eyes. Leora spoke about how humanity at its strongest was not measured by wealth but by courage and kindness. She told her mother that peace built on force never lasts, but peace built on respect becomes a shield stronger than armies. They stood facing each other for a long moment. Then something in the queen's face changed. The cold distance melted a little. She reached for Leora's hand and said that she had once hoped to rule differently, but had been bound by fear of failure. Leora reminded her that true power meant trust. The queen smiled faintly and said that the young sometimes teach the old what time has made them forget. When they left the room, everyone waited for the queen's decision. She turned to the gathering crowd and said that the Empire of Solaria would enter a new era. There would be no forced unions between houses, no alliances built on marriage bargains. She declared that her daughter had shown what honor truly meant, and that all rulers must learn from her. The hall erupted in surprise and joy. Aaron stood at the back near the engineers, uncertain if he should move. The queen noticed him and called him forward. She thanked him publicly for saving the station and for guarding her daughter with courage. For the first time in her reign, the queen bowed her head slightly to a common man. Dana Mills and the rest of the council applauded. That evening, a great celebration filled the station. Music played through every corridor.
Ow.
Flags of Solaria and the Terran colonies hung side by side above the halls. Leora walked among the people, laughing and light-hearted. Children ran to greet her, and workers lifted their cups in cheer. Aaron joined her near the window. He looked out toward the stars and said this was what real unity looked like, people together without chains. She told him that it was only the beginning. The next morning, the queen prepared to return home. Before she left, she embraced her daughter and told her to continue her mission among the colonies. Leora promised that she would. When the fleet departed, the people waved from the decks. The shining ships vanished into the blue light of space. Life on New Denver returned to its steady rhythm. Leora and Aaron worked side by side, helping to plan new projects connecting Solaria with the Terran settlements. Their friendship grew stronger with each passing day. Leora no longer wore the heavy robes of royalty. She wore the plain uniform of the colony, her hair tied back, her smile bright. People respected her not for her title but for her spirit. One evening she stood again by the wide window. The stars glittered quietly above the curve of the planet. Aaron came to stand beside her. In that silence both of them knew that their paths, once so far apart, now moved together. Leora whispered that freedom was not just the right to choose, but the courage to keep choosing every day. Aaron nodded in agreement. Somewhere in her heart she thanked the stars for bringing her to this place where humanity had reminded her of its greatest gift. The simple power of a kind and fearless heart.